Alright, for video number 3, we're going to go over characteristics and the attacks. And so for the characteristics, we're going to talk about how you go through and actually see each of the characteristics, understand how they work. We're going to have the modifiers for characteristics, how you allocate your attacks, all the to hit and to wound charts, and then we'll talk about the armor saves. So for the characteristics, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the rule book and show you on the screen what everything means. So when we come down, we're going to have the global characteristics, and when we look at those, there'll be several things here. We'll have advance rate, and when you see in the army books, they're going to be the short version, and then this is going to be the full version. And that's how far the model can move in inches with just a regular move. We're also going to have a march rate, and this is going to be how fast the model can march. A lot of times you're going to see that's going to be double the advance rate, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you can march farther than your double your advance. There are some models that are going to have the same advance and march rate, which just means that they cannot march. Now, discipline is going to be the model's ability to stand and fight, which would be more like the leadership. It's like, how trustworthy is my model to stay and do what I wanted to do as their general versus they're just going to go run off and do their own thing in the heat of the battle. So next we're going to have the defensive characteristics. They're going to have 4 different parts of that. So first is going to be their HP or their health points. And really that's just how many health points or wounds do they have before they're going to be removed as a casualty. Min-sized model are going to have 1. We get to monsters, they can have up to 9 health points. Defensive skill, that's going to be how good they're at avoiding to hit in melee. So very skilled elf lords are going to be much better at being not hit than a little goblin character. And then we'll have resilience, which is basically going to be how tough is the model and how can it withstand actually being hit. So for example, that elf lord that it's going to be really quick and able to dodge on the defensive is not going to have much resilience, because once it's hit, it's going to crumple pretty hard versus say a monster with really thick skin. And then armor is going to be the innate armor of the model, which is going to be as you get hit, then you can have a chance to have an armor save, and the better the armor save, then you'll roll lower on the dice to not be wounded. Alright, and then each model is also going to have their offensive characteristics. Agility is going to be how quick they are when they're in melee and they're fighting. So going back to that elf lord, they're going to be extremely quick. So there's going to be very few things in the games that are going to be able to strike faster than an elf lord. And this is how we determine who fights at what initiative. And with agility, that's going to help you out a lot if you can kill your opponent before they can swing back at you. Attack value is just going to be how many attacks the model has in general. Offensive skill is going to be the opposite of that defensive skill. So some models are really good at hitting other people, but they're not very good at defending, and vice versa. And so your offensive is just going to be, how good are you with actually your melee weapons. Your strength is going to be how easily you can wound models. When we're going to be looking at these, the defensive skill and the offensive skills are normally compared, and that's how you figure how easy you hit. And then you're going to have the strength versus the resilience, and that's going to show you how easily you wound somebody. And then the last one is going to be armor penetration, which is going to be how well does your weapon or your hit just cut through armor, and we're going to compare that again to their armor. So if someone has an armor that is 3, which means you would need a 4 up, well, if you have an armor penetration of 2, then that goes from needing a 4 to save on armor to needing a 6 to save on armor, because we've taken 2 of the armors away because we're hitting it. And we'll get into that in more detail here in a little bit. So here I'm going to show you what this looks like on a typical model. So this is going to be a high prince, so this is going to be a highborn elf hero, and you'll see that when we have the global, we're going to have the advance, the march, and the discipline. And then on the defensive, we're going to have your health points, your defensive, your resilience, and your armor. And then for your offensive, we're going to have the attack, the offensive, the strength, the AP, and the agility. Behind this, we're also going to have some model rules. So model by model, we'll have different things. So for example, highborn elves have martial discipline, which that's something that's going to be specific to their army. You can see that they have no armor, but he does have light armor. So that's already going to give him 1 armor point because of the light armor. And then down here, he's agility 8, which is going to say that he's going to swing very fast for most things, but he also has lightning reflexes. And again, we're going to get into all the special terms later, but just to show you, models will have model rules in here as well. Most of the time, you're going to see the characteristics being anywhere from 0 to 10, when we're talking about things other than, for example, the advance up here. Now, not on this one, but sometimes you're going to see a random characteristic. So for example, you might see attacks at D6 plus 1 or 3D3, or there'll be different things that you'll see, different attacks. Now if you see something that says advance at any sort of random, then they're going to use the random movement X, and that's going to be a special rule. Now if you have just a man-sized model, these are all going to be pretty cut and dry, but if you come down here and let's say that he decides to ride a specific mount, and I'm going to go down and do an Ancient Dragon because that's fun. Let's go down to Ancient Dragon in his mount options. Okay, so when we look at the Ancient Dragon, so now we're going to have Discipline is going to be a C, which means that's going to be off character, but everything else is going to be based off of the dragon. Because he's gigantic, we're going to be using pretty much everything as the dragon, not off of the Lord. But let's say that he decided to ride something that was not a dragon, that was going to be smaller. So in this case, our Lord decided to ride an elven horse. So he's going to have the advance and the march of the horse, which makes sense. The discipline is going to be the character. However, when we get down here, the health points are going to be off the character. The defense is going to be off the character. The resilience is going to be off the character. And the armor is going to be character plus 2. So this horse is giving him some additional armor, but pretty much everything else on the defense, the mount is not going to be helping the character. On the offense, this is going to show just what the mount's able to do. So the hero is going to attack separately, but the mount's going to have one attack at offensive 3, strength 3, 0 AP, and agility 4. And then you're going to see that the mount is harnessed. And a lot of times you're going to see harnessed on mounts, and we'll get into all the, again, the special terms a little bit later. But you can see the smaller the mount, if you don't have a gigantic mount, then it's going to make a lot more sense that you're trying to hit the character, versus if you're trying to fight a great big dragon, then anybody attacking is normally going to be trying to hit the dragon, so we're going to go all of the defensive and everything off of the dragon. So this can help the elf quite a bit. If he's going to be a resilience 3 or 4 with 3 wounds, you put him on a dragon, now all of a sudden he's going to be resilience 6 and he's going to have 6 wounds or sometimes 7 wounds. So the defense can really help if you get a big mount in there. And when we're talking about mounts, you can see here, this is what you're going to be for your height, your type, and your base, and it's always going to go off of the mount. So for an elven horse, we're going to be standard, cavalry, and 25 by 50 mil. If we go to an eagle, you'd see we'd go to large, cavalry, and 50 by 50. And if we go down to the dragons, so there's actually 3 types of dragons they can ride, and you can see a young dragon is going to be large, cavalry, and 50 by 100. And you'll see that we are going to use the defense of the character because it's not going to be as big a dragon as the others, and then your armor is going to be character plus 1. Now when we get down to a regular dragon, now we go to gigantic, it's going to be beast, and we're going to go 50 by 100. And you can see that once we switch to the beast type over the cavalry type, that's going to show you a lot of times when you'll start using the defense of the mount. And then if we go to the Ancient Dragon, we're still gigantic and beast, but we're even bigger on the base size. We're 100 by 150. However, if we look at the difference here, the regular dragon has 6 health points, whereas the Ancient Dragon is going to have 8 health points. We're also going to be stronger. The regular dragon is going to have strength 6, and then the Ancient Dragon is going to be strength 7. Now, anytime you see in the book that you have to take a characteristic test, you're going to go off of the characteristic of the best of the model, and you're going to roll a d6, and you're trying to meet that characteristic or lower. So for example, if we had to take a characteristic strength test with this High Prince, we're going to be a strength 4, so we want to roll a 4 or less. Same way if we were going to be doing a resilience test, but now we would need a 3 or less. So that's what would be really nice if the High Prince was on a dragon, and that was resilience 6. So then normally you would need the number or less. However, a 6 is always a fail on a characteristic test. So if he was on a dragon, the only time that he would fail a resilience test was if it was a 6. Whereas if he was on his own, on a 3 or lower, he's going to pass. On a 4 or higher, he's going to fail. So when we take a discipline test, this is going to be a test where you're going to find the highest discipline for anybody in the unit or the model. If you've got a bunch of normal troops, they're going to be discipline 6. However, you have a leader in there that's going to be discipline, say, 9 or 10. So this High Prince is discipline 10. Then you get to use the discipline of the High Prince, as long as he's in the unit. And with that, you're going to take 2 dice, and you want to be at or below whatever that number is. So in this case, as long as you don't roll a 11 or a 12, because the 12 is most you can get with 2 dice, then this discipline test is going to be passed. Now there's a lot of things that can require you to take a discipline test. Some are going to be things like panic test, break test. There'll be tests to redirect your charge if someone flees. So anytime that you're needing to take discipline, just go find your highest discipline for the unit and go ahead and use it. And I will get into a little bit later, but if you have your general close by, your general can give his discipline to other units and models near him. So in the game, there's a lot of ways you can modify certain roles, and what I want to do is just go over what can be modified and how you prioritize which you modify first. So priority step number 1 is going to be value set to a certain number. So for example, if you're using another model's value, like for example your general's leadership, if you're going to use his leadership, you're going to do that first. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to do any multiplication or division, and you're going to round all fractions up. So for example, if you are a 5, that's going to go down to 2.5, which ends up being a 3. The next thing you do on step 3 is going to be addition and subtraction. And then finally, you're going to do rolls that always or never succeed or fail on a certain result. So for example, if you can never hit better than a 3, then that would be one of the last priority steps that you would do. Now there are some things that you do want to keep in mind, that any agility and attack values cannot be modified lower than a 1, no matter what happens with the modifiers up here. The value of all other characteristics cannot be modified lower than a 0. Armor cannot be modified to exceed a maximum of 6, which just means that if you that would be a 1 up, and a 1 always fails when you're trying to roll your armor, but you can't get better than a 1, so you can't get to negative numbers on your armor by getting a max of 6 armor points. And that may seem confusing, but when we get into armor, I'm going to show you that in much more detail. And then the agility and the discipline cannot be modified to exceed a maximum of 10. Now when we look at the attacks that you can do, you have 2 basic types of attacks. You're going to have your melee attacks, which is going to be stuff in combat, and then you're going to have your ranged attacks, which is going to be anything when units are not in base to base. Under melee attacks, you're going to have your normal close combat attacks, which is going to be your units hitting each other, and then you're going to have special attacks. There's lots of different types of special attacks, like impact hits, there's going to be stomps, many other special attacks that you're going to be doing while you're in close combat. And then you're also going to have the ranged attacks, and that's going to be normally shooting attacks when you're using your bows or your handguns or pistols or whatever you're doing shooting. And then you're going to have all of your others. And a lot of times what you're going to see that being is your magic, but it can be other things from ranged as well. So now that you know what type of attacks are possible, let's go over the attack sequence and just what happens. So the first thing that will happen is you need to allocate your attacks, and this is especially important when you're in the close combat melee part, where you'll need to say, I'm attacking this person or this person. Sometimes it'll matter if you're trying to attack characters or champions or other models that would matter, that it's not going into the general health pool of the unit. Then you're going to determine the number of hits that you get, and I'm going to go over how you hit and wound and everything here in just a little bit. Once you have your hit, then you're going to distribute hits, and that's only if applicable, and most of the time that would be from shooting, because again in close combat or melee you have already determined who you're hitting to begin with. So for everything that did come through as a successful hit, then you're going to roll to wound and see if any of the wounds go through. So then your opponent's going to pull out all the successful wounds, and they're going to take their saves. So the first save you always take is going to be an armor save if you have one. And then if it's failed or you don't have one, then you'll take any special saves. The special saves can be things like Aegis or Fortitude. And then for anything that doesn't save with an armor or a special save, you're either going to remove the health points or just take the model off as a casualty, depending on if they're multi-wound or single wound models. Alright, so now that we've went over the attack sequence, let's go over how you actually hit and wound and do armor saves. I would say the one thing you're going to want to do is towards the back of the rule book, there's going to be 5 or 6 pages which has what I would call a cheat sheet. It's going to show you quick tables on how you find out different things, and one of the tables is going to be the close combat to hit table. So I would definitely pull that out, print it if you don't print anything else, and have that so when you're learning you can easily reference and see how things work. So what we're going to do is every time you roll to hit in close combat, you're going to take the offensive skill of the person who's attacking, and then you're going to minus the defensive skill of the person that's being hit. And then that's going to show you the roll that's going to be needed to hit. And when we say, you know, anything plus, that just means if you roll that number or better, then it's going to be successful. So on a 2+, the only thing that's going to fail is going to be a 1. That would represent someone who is much better at hitting than their opponent is at defending. So for example, on that, we're going to have a 4 or more. So to give you an example, if someone has an offensive skill of 7, and then the person that they're attacking is going to be a defensive skill of 3, then that would be 4 or more. So if the defensive was lower or the offensive was higher, it wouldn't matter. You can't hit on better than a 2+, so basically I would call that anything buts is what I would need to hit. So the next example, we're going to see it and the next one quite a bit more in a scheme of combats, and that's where you're going to be 1 to 3 better than your opponent. So if that person had a defensive of 3 and you were an offensive of 4, 5, or 6, and you were going to be 1 to 3 better, and at that point you would need a 3+ to hit. And so what we're saying is a 3+ is a little bit better than average because 4+ is average, and we're saying you're a little bit better for offensive skill than the person is for defensive, so you're going to hit a little bit better than the average. Now on the 0 to -3, that's going to be a 4-up, so that's going to be a 50-50 roll on that. So what we're saying is maybe your person is going to be offensive 3, and this would count if the defense was 3, 4, 5, or 6. Now if the defense goes to 7 or higher, that's where we're going to go to the next category, which is going to be -4 to -7. So the next one's going to be representative when a common core infantry model would be attacking a hero. And so in that case, if you are an offensive 3 and then the person you're attacking is going to be a defensive of say 7 or higher and not getting more than an 8 or less, then you're going to need a 5 to hit. Now on the very rare occasion where you're going to be offensive so low that you are 8 less than the person you're trying to hit, then you would need a 6. That can happen, but it's going to be very, very rare. Most of the time what you're going to see is the 3, 4, 5 range, and then when you see very epic heroes hitting infantry models, they're going to hit on 2s, and just the opposite when you have those infantry models trying to hit the epic heroes and you have a very lowly infantry model, that's when you may hit on a 6+. Alright, so now that we know how to hit, let's talk about when you wound. So after you've hit, what you're going to do is you're going to take the strength of whatever your hit was and you're going to minus the resilience of the person that you are trying to wound. So with this, what I want to do is start right in the middle, and that's going to be a 0. And so what we're saying is if your strength and your resilience are exactly the same, then you need a 4+, and that's going to be that 50-50 thing that I talk about quite a bit on this. And it's a concept I want you to understand because everything, how they determine how easy something hits or wounds, is all going to be based on how good or bad something is, and that's where we're going to start right at that 4+. If you are 1 stronger, so your strength is +1 to the resilience, then you're going to hit 1 better. And this table is going to go exact proportion 1 to 1 and also down 1 to 1, whereas to hit you have to get several in a spread before you actually start doing better. So if you are strength 5 and the resilience is 4, then that would be 1 better, so then you would need a 3+ to hit. Now if you were strength 6 and the resilience was a 4, then again that would be anything but or a 2+. And it wouldn't matter if you got higher at strength 7, 8, 9, up to 10, it wouldn't matter because at 2 or more, you're always going to be on anything but or a 2+. Now it's going to go just the opposite. If you're going to be strength 3 and you're going against resilience 4, then you're going to need a 5. And if you're going to be strength 3 going resilience 5, that's going to be 2, then that's going to be a 6+. And again, that also wouldn't matter going the other way. You're always going to wound on a 6, no matter how lowly your strength is and how absolutely tough and resilient the person is that you're attacking. And one thing I would say, when you're starting to look at your strengths and your toughnesses, this is something that's really going to affect the way that combats and actual wounds work, even on things like magical spells. That once you start getting 1 or 2 above the person, you're going to have a lot more wounds go through, and you're going to start seeing a lot more casualties off of your wounds. Okay, so now that we've wounded somebody, we need to talk about the armor save, which is going to be the first save that you're going to take once you've been wounded. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your armor minus the armor penetration, and that's going to give you the armor value that you have left. And then what I like to do is convert that into what your save is on that armor. So for example, if you have 0 or less, which means you basically lost all your armor, whether you didn't have any to begin with or the armor penetration was so much it brings it to a 0, then there's just no save possible. Every time that you are going to be wounded, you will take a health point unless you have some sort of special save that you can take. So if you do the subtraction and you have 1 armor left, that's going to give you a 6+. So just to give you an example, if we have heavy armor, that's going to be 2, and a shield is going to be 3. So on an armor value of 3, you're going to get a 4+ for a save. However, if there's an armor penetration of 2, then that's going to bring you down to 1, so again you would be on a 6+. If it was armor penetration of 3, which would be equal to what you had for your armor, then you would be at no armor save possible. So what you'll see on here is these are also a direct correlation. So every time that you're going to remove one of your armor values, then it's going to go up in how much you need to roll. So if you have a 5 or a 6 armor value left, then that means that you're going to save on anything but or a 2+. Now we're going to go into special saves a little bit later on in the book, but there are going to be Aegis and Fortitude special saves, and these are not saves where you're going to actually modify things. There are some things where it may make you re-roll it, or you could lose it completely, but you're not going to have the same sort of modification. So armor saves are directly related to the armor penetration, whereas special saves are going to be a different save all on their own, and we'll talk about that later on in the book. Alright, so that's it for this video. So on the next video, join us and we're going to talk about setting up a game, getting the battlefield ready, your scenarios, and then once we get through all of that, we'll be ready to start going through all of the different phases of the game. Hi YouTube, this is Mike with Dark Wizard Gaming. Thanks so much for watching our How to Play 9th Age video series. Now if you did like the video, please use the like and subscribe feature below here and feel free to leave any comments. And now if you have questions about how the game works or any rules questions, I would strongly suggest you go to the 9th Age forum and actually post on there. They're going to have a full team and there's a community there to help you with any rules questions. If you do comment here, I will answer your questions, but it may take a week or 2 before I get back with you, whereas if you go to the 9th Age forums, you'll get answers right away. So enjoy your 9th Age gaming. Thanks.